Middle East. So Vanessa, let's welcome you to UK column. And I'm going to say, have you got any good news for the Middle East? I rather fear that the news is getting worse.
Yes, I mean, things are escalating. We were talking before I came on about the fact that here in Syria, particularly where we've been under an economic blockade that has basically stagnated society probably since 2018 until now, any kind of break in that stagnation is relatively welcome in a sense that it means things will eventually move forward despite the interim escalation, violence and pain. And of course, I also want to add, Brian, that immigration, yes, it's a problem, but when you mention the causes, of course, for me, the primary cause is our government's neo-colonialist agendas and foreign policy. In other words, the bombing and the pillaging of the global south, including West Asia, including Latin American countries, but particularly West Asia. So I think, we should probably talk about that a little bit more in extra. There's an awful lot going on in the region, so I've sort of tried to condense it as much as I can. So I'll sort of whiz through the facts, and I'm sure we can extrapolate a bit in extra. So last week we talked about the cause of the escalation, which is basically the double assassination of a Hezbollah senior commander, Ismail Haniyeh, who was the leader of the Hamas organization and also the chief negotiator with Israel over the release of the hostages in Gaza and any potential ceasefire. So that clearly shows how interested Israel is in bringing forth peace in Palestine. And then, of course, there was the US strike against the Iraqi PMF or PMU, the Popular Mobilization Forces, that actually comprise part of the Iraqi official military. Now, there has already been a degree of response from the resistance axis itself. Several US personnel were injured in the Iraq Ain al-Assad airbase attack, which, of course, you'll remember was also attacked after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani and Abu Mahdi Mohandes in 2020 under the Trump administration. At the same time, and again, this is part of the regional maneuvers, US troops have actually returned to Kirkuk in Iraq. On the next slide, please, Brian. For the first time since 2020, reports are saying that basically they're there to occupy the oil-rich area of Kirkuk under the pretext of fighting ISIS. And yet again, that hypocrisy is demonstrated by the next slide, where in reality, the Kurdish Contras, who are basically controlled by Israel and the United States in northeast Syria, and there they are, of course, occupying and trading Syrian resources, including Syrian oil, released ISIS fighters, which is nothing more than another US proxy in the region, and therefore Iraq is increasing its security on the Syrian-Iraqi border. CENTCOM chief Michael Kurilla is in Israel for preparations against Iran and Hezbollah retaliation. And of course, that has included the movement of ships and troop carriers into the region. And the following map is just one of many that I found on social media. I can't sort of vouch for its accuracy, but it does at least demonstrate the hardware that the United States is moving into the area, both into the Red Sea, into the Gulf of Oman, into the Mediterranean. And of course, the UK has its basis on Cyprus, from which has been ferried multiple weapons and also NATO troops into northern Lebanon under the pretext of being able to evacuate citizens in the case of war. I'll leave the audience to interpret that as they wish. A very recent interview by Judge Napolitano with Alastair Crooke, who's a former British diplomat who knows the region extremely well, worked in Israel, worked in the Middle East. Now, he makes the point that the US, while it denies any foreknowledge of the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, he makes the point that, however, the ships that are now in, for example, the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, that didn't happen overnight. This was planned, and according to him, from the time or even before Netanyahu went to the state. So let's just have a quick listen of what he has to say.
But again, it's telling. I mean, you can't just supply these ships to order. I mean, they must have been given their orders and prepared and ready sometime before Netanyahu gave his speech. All these positions in place, and the head of CENTCOM is now sitting in the Middle East trying to bring together, if you like, an alliance of Arab air forces that will help the Americans to shoot down Iranian missiles again.
There have also been concerted efforts, not only by sort of what I would describe as US emissaries, including Jordan, that made an unprecedented visit to Tehran to try and persuade the Iranians not to respond to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. It's worth remembering, of course, that Jordan was responsible for the air defense for Israel in the previous Iranian retaliation after Israel bombed the embassy or the consulate in Damascus. And also worth noting that earlier this year, it had been discussed that NATO was to open an office in Jordan in its first official representation in the Middle East, which is another major move. And again, I just want to bring in Alastair Crooke, where he talks about the fact that Israel should deal with the situation on their own.
The G7 pleading with Iran, oh, look, you mustn't do anything, you've got to restrain yourself. They never turn around and say to Israel, you ought to restrain yourself. It's not Iran that provoked this. You did this double assassination precisely into provoking a response from Iran. So you ought to be sorting it out, not asking all the rest of the West and America to come and assist us and help you with what you did it. You made your bed, you should lie in it.
Totally agree, but of course Israel is incapable of defending itself without the help of the US and the UK and its regional allies. There have been a number of theories circulating about what the response from the resistance axis will be. This is just one of them, a calculated simultaneous strike on Israel. And if we have a quick look at the text of the article, which is in the cradle on the next slide, please, Brian.
Okay. There we are.
Thank you. So they're saying, sorry, there's a really annoying fly. Retaliation is all but certain and could happen within hours, according to senior US officials. I think this report came out a couple of days ago. And of course, part of the response is this psychological warfare, Israel not knowing when the attack will come in, the panic and confusion among the settlers in the occupied territories. So basically what they're saying, Hezbollah General Secretary Hassan Nasrallah has promised a painful yet calculated blow to Tel Aviv, and so on. So basically this report is saying that the retaliation will be a combined retaliation. Other reports are saying, no, it will be, if you like, a tiered retaliation. So again, let's just listen to what Alastair Crooke has to say about the preparation that Iran is making for the retaliation.
First of all, there's going to be no advance warning. Secondly, they're not going to be slow old drones. They're going to be high performance, smart missiles. And they're going to come from Iran. They're going to come from Hezbollah en masse. And they are going to come from the Houthis. And they are going to come from Iraq. I believe missiles have been moved have been prepositioned. This is why we've been in a sort of period of some delay.
And last night, Syed Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, gave an hour-long or a bit more speech, and he basically said our response will come regardless of the consequences. So in other words, what the resistance axis is now saying, they understand that the war will escalate with this retaliation, but they can't keep absorbing Israel's provocations. What is Israeli media saying to some degree? I think it's trying to be a little bit hopeful on this. So on the next slide, basically this was taken from, I think it's the Times of Israel. If we can just move forward to the next slide. Iran may rethink Israel attacks plans amid intense US diplomatic efforts. There were other reports also saying that increased US presence in the area is going to deter Iran. I think that's highly unlikely. There has also been a lot of social media chatter about apparently Russia supplying weapons in a steady flow to Iran. In the last few days, that's actually been denied by high-level people in Iran itself. But of course, there is a defense agreement between Russia and Iran, and that's been demonstrated by Shoigu's visit in the last few days. And this is actually part of the retaliation. Hamas has announced Yahya al-Sinwar, the new Politburo chief, so to replace Ismail Haniyeh. Now, one of the reasons that Israel probably assassinated Ismail Haniyeh was that they wanted Khaled Mashal, who was formerly the external leader of Hamas, to replace him. Why? Because Khaled Mashal is, let's say, at least collaborative with the Zionist entity. And so therefore, the fact that actually Hamas has elected one of the more hardline leaders actually present with the military resistance factions in Gaza and probably at the top of the Israeli assassination list means basically that's sending a very strong message to Israel of the resistance unity, not only in Palestine, but also regionally.
Vanessa, what can we say? It's really terrible to listen. Your excellent reports, but it's really tough to listen to it because the violence is just escalating and escalating. I'm going to say to our audience, if the UK government under Keir Starmer, same under the Conservatives, can't call for peace in the Middle East or peace in Ukraine, I'm going to suggest it's very unlikely they are going to call for peace in this country because the fog of war and violence allows them to. Okay, well, let's bring Vanessa back in because despite Douglas Murray claiming that if you're anti-Zionist, you're anti-Semitic, it appears that there are people in the Jewish community who are absolutely not happy with what's happening around them in their own country.
Yeah, and I also think he should remember that the Zionist project stole the land from Palestinians under false pretenses, and the 1947 mandate to partition Palestine is considered illegal. So I'm coming back to the story that I covered last week of the anal rape of a Palestinian prisoner by, I think it was 9 Israeli military soldiers. And this was an article in Haaretz. So in Israeli media, the Seydeh Tayman doctor who saw the abused Gazan detainee said that he couldn't believe an Israeli prison guard could do such a thing. Basically, information obtained by Haaretz shows that the Gazan detainee suffered from a ruptured bowel, a severe injury to his anus, lung damage, and broken ribs. And he was taken to a hospital for treatment. Now, the video that we're going to show now was actually shown on Israeli media. It's not particularly graphic, so people don't need to worry about that. The quality is not great, and the translation from Hebrew to English, I think, has been done by AI, so I can't verify it. But I've seen a number of reports basically talking about what the video is saying. But it shows exactly what these soldiers did to this prisoner. The quality is not great, as I said, so you need to kind of peer at it. So let's play that.
Late in the evening, the firing camp shook. The Yemeni Hamas detainees are lying on the floor with their hands not covered. Here is a group of reserve soldiers from Hokhma. A unit is used to secure the facility. They take the terrorist. Here they are, here in the corner of the facility. The photo includes documentation of the crime attributed to the reserve men, a sodomy act, among the causes of Enos. Hours later, the terrorist was taken to the hospital bleeding. His injuries were described as complex. The medical determination is unequivocal. The injuries were caused by the insertion of an object.
So I don't really need to interpret that. Opinion in Haaretz today, the tip of the iceberg, Israel cannot whitewash the horrific abuse of Palestinians by its soldiers. And also bearing in mind when we talk about hostages, there are now 9,000 estimated prisoners in Israeli jails just in the occupied territories. So I'm not including Gaza. So again, I want to come back to Alastair Crooke. And I want to talk about this article that he's written for Strategic Culture. I recommend everybody reads it. So he talks about the 1948 Irgun reborn. Irgun was actually one of the original Zionist terrorist groups that carried out the crimes like the bombing of Hotel Camp David, I think is the name. And he's talking about the return to this group, to Irgun, with the rise in the far-right extremism in Israel, controlled by the likes of Smotrich, the finance minister, and Ben-Gvir within Netanyahu's administration. And I find it very interesting what he talks about here. So he's talking about internal divisions potentially leading to an internal war in Israel itself. So let's just play this short clip.
So in a sense, what we saw there was, if you like, a foretaste of Israel going back to something most had thought it had left behind in 48, into militia. The militia, it was a militia, it was vigilante militia from the settlements who came down and stormed those two IDF bases. And the police could do nothing to stop them. And then the Knesset justified it all. So we may see something of this taking place, akin to a war, the members of the state of Judea descending down in order to fight the state of Israel. That's what it signaled. So really a key event hardly noticed in much of the media, but really important, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Alastair on that. The internal divisions in Israel are increasing every single day. I mean, of course, you've got the riots and the protests about the inaction by Netanyahu's government, referenced the hostages, and of course, the assassination of the chief negotiator for the opposition or for Hamas doesn't imbue the faith that Netanyahu wants to get the hostages released. But this is also interesting. There have been major protests from the ultra-Orthodox Jews, the Haredi Jews in the occupied territories, who are saying, because of the recent law brought in by the Knesset, basically stating that they will be enlisted into the IDF, saying that they will die before enlisting. So if we just have a quick look at the actual report itself. So Israel released a statement on the 6th of August condemning the storming of a military base that day by ultra-Orthodox Jews, also known as the Haredim, who were protesting a recent government decision to enlist them into the Israeli army. Breaking into IDF bases is a grave offensive and against the law, the Israeli army said, adding that the enlistment of Haredi Jews into the military is a critical operational need and we are determined to continue advancing it. Demonstrators from the ultra-Orthodox community stormed the Tel Hashameh base in Israel earlier on the 6th of August during a demonstration against compulsory conscription. Channel 12 News described the situation as out of control, with rioters outnumbering security forces and dozens breaking into the base. So, we are, in my opinion, seeing the state of Israel imploding. So what will come first, the resistance, retaliation, or Israel's self-immolation?
Yes, it's serious stuff. But of course, none of this is being reported, Vanessa, which is a great shame, because we're just not told alternative opinions from within the Jewish community. And I believe I have mentioned to the UK column audience before, I've been trying to engage with the Jewish community in UK to talk about some of these issues. But even Jews that want to challenge their own government are frightened of speaking out. And I find this oppressive fear is very nasty. It's very pernicious. We should be able to speak freely about all sorts of topics, because it's only by talking and the dialogue that we keep peace in sight. And that's what we need. Calm, peaceful reflection to sort out the problems that we face at the moment, and in particular the attacks. I'm just going to end on this one slide. I know we've overrun the news time a little bit, but I think this is important. There was a video circulating on social media showing a group of Muslims attacking a man at a pub, and that attack was pretty outrageous and horrible. However, the result of it was that people came forward from within that multi-ethnic, multicultural community to apologise, and also to say, not in my name. And the comment from the lady who ran the local pub involved said that most were more sensible than not. And I think this is something for us to reflect on. If you're being sucked into the anger and the angst and the stress against another group of people, you are succumbing to the psychological warfare that's being unleashed against us. So stay calm, stay peaceful, stay talking to the man or woman next to you, because if we end up in the camps, we're not going to be bothered by the colour of anybody's skin next to us. It will be us versus the people with the key. So I'm going to end there. We're going to have UK column extra in a few minutes, and we will be doing some further analysis on some of these subjects. So if you're a UK column monthly member, please join us for that. Vanessa, thank you very much. Charles, thank you. We'll see everybody in extra time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.